To solve this problem, we need to iterate over this string from the beginning to the end and count the number of times each character has been repeated. Now, what data structure is ideal for looking up items quickly? A hash table. So we can store each character and the number of times it's repeated in a hash table. So as we iterate over the string, we get the current character and quickly look it up in our hash table. If we have it, we'll increment the number of times it's repeated. Otherwise, we'll add it to our hash table. So after this iteration, our hash table is going to look like this. We're going to have a key value pair like this, A equals 2, because we have 2 A's in this string. We also have a white space that is repeated twice. So there you go. What about G? G is not repeated, so G is going to be set to 1. So in the first step, we should build this hash table. Once we're done, then we'll iterate over the string from the beginning one more time. We get the current character and look up the number of times it's been repeated. If it's more than 1, we're going to ignore it. We go to the next character. So as an example here, white space is also repeated twice. We move on. We get to G. Now, how many times G is repeated in this string? Only once. So this is the first non-repeating character. We stop our iteration right away and return that character. That is our algorithm. Now let's implement this in code. So I'm going to add a new class here. You didn't have to do this. I'm just adding this class so we have all the source code for this course in one place. So a new Java class, we call it character finder. Now we add a method that returns a character. We call it find first non-repeating char or character. And we give it a string. Now here we need a hash table. So let's create a variable of type map of characters, because our keys are going to be characters and their values are going to be integers. You want to count them, right? Now let's import this and set it to a new hash map. All right. Next, we need to iterate over this string. We have done this before. It's super easy. So for var character in string dot to character array, we're calling this method because we cannot iterate over a string in Java. We have to convert it to a character array. Now, in each iteration, we have to see if we have this character in our hash table. If we have it, we'll increment its count by 1. Otherwise, we'll insert it into our hash table. So we can write an if statement like this. If map contains key of this character, we have to read the value, which is the count. So we call map.get this key. We store the result in a variable called count. And then we update it by calling the put method. So map.put character with this count. Now, otherwise, if we don't have this character in our hash table, we need to insert it with a count of 1. So we call map.put character with count of 1. Now, this code looks ugly. It looks repetitive. We can consolidate it using a one-liner. Let me show you. So first, we calculate the count like this. Count. Here we use the ternary operator. So we type a Boolean expression, map.contains key. Now, if we have this, we set count to map.get character. Otherwise, we set count to 0. So in case you're not familiar with this syntax, this is the ternary operator in Java. First, we have a condition. If this condition is true, the value that we have after this question mark, in this case, map.get, will be returned and inserted into this variable. Otherwise, if we don't have this key, this other value will be returned. So this is a compact way of writing an if statement. Now that we have count, we simply call map.put character and increment count. So if it's the first time we're adding this item, count is going to be 1. Otherwise, it's going to be incremented by 1. Now, these two lines are exactly identical to these few lines. So let's clean up our code. That was our first step. At the end of this loop, we have populated our hash table. Before going any further, let's just print that on the console. And here I'm going to return 0, just for simplicity. Now back to the main class. Let's test this. So let's create a character finder object and call the the method that we just created and give it this string, a green apple. Now we don't care about the return value. We just want to see what we have in our hash table. So let's run our program. There you go. So an empty space is repeated twice, P is repeated twice, and so on. Now the interesting thing here is that these keys are not in the same order as the characters in our string. So here in our input, A is the first character, and maybe you expected A to be the first key in this hash map, but that is not the case. This is all because of the hash function inside this hash map or hash table. So items are not inserted sequentially in memory. This hash function will figure out where they should be inserted, okay? So now we know the frequency of each character. Finally, we need to iterate over this input string one more time. Look up each character in our hash table. If its value equals 1, we'll return that character. That is super easy. So instead of this print statement, we need to iterate over our string. So we need another for loop, var ch in string to character array. But I don't want to do this twice. I would rather to convert this to a character array only once and reuse it twice in this method. So let's declare a variable and call it chars and initialize it like this. All right, now we can reuse this in both places. Our code is cleaner and more efficient. If you have 1 million characters in this string, we don't have to convert it to 2 different character arrays in memory, okay? Now in the second iteration, we look up this character in our hash table. So if map.get this character equals 1, we immediately return this character as the first non-repeating character. Now, what if we finish with this loop but didn't return anything? That means every character has been repeated at least twice. So here we should return a special character that we can get from the character class. So we type character dot min value. Look at the value of this field. This is kind of like a null character. It's not really null. It's just like a non-existent character. There you go. Now, let's test our code. So back to the main class. We call this method, get the result, and print it on the console. So the first non-repeating character is G.